Hello, Faith United Church. It's nice to see you again. Thanks for having me back as a guest preacher, even in this virtual way. Today, I'm giving you a sermon which is called Wrestling Match. It is based on Genesis chapter 2, verses 22 to 31, which is the story of Jacob wrestling with an unknown creature at Peniel. It is being preached in person at Yellowknife United Church this morning and virtually for Faith United Church in Hamilton on August the 2nd, 2026. Unless you are extraordinarily lucky, you know the suffering of a sleepless night. The house is quiet. Your mind is not. It is yelling. It is replaying conversations, rehashing old arguments, rehearsing for tomorrow. Sleep is supposed to be restful. It's important, we're told, but it's anything but. Your shoulders are tight, your jaw is clenched. It's midnight, then it's 2:30 a.m., then it's 4 a.m., and you lie awake staring into the darkness. I have so much to do. Oh, I forgot to call the pharmacy. Why is my kid acting this way? God, I hate my job. Why did I say that dumb thing in 8th grade? Who am I anyway, and what am I even doing here? It's the middle of the night, and Jacob isn't sleeping again. Now, the lectionary has taken us through the book of Genesis all summer long, but if you're not sure where we are in the story today, let's take a moment to catch you up. Jacob is the grandson of our ancestor Abraham, the younger son of Isaac and Rebekah. I say younger, but that's only a technicality because Jacob is a twin. He came out grabbing onto the heel of his older brother Esau, and he's been trying to get ahead of him ever since. Jacob is a very complicated hero, a trickster, a social climber, and very much his mother's favorite. As a young man, he tricked Esau out of his birthright for a bowl of stew, and later he deceived his elderly blind father into giving him the blessing that rightfully belonged to his brother. He has spent the last 20 years on the run from his brother Esau, whom he assumes wants to kill him. Now, Jacob has built a very good life in Haran, the land of his uncle Laban. He's married his cousins, Rachel and Leah, and he has 13 children with them both, along with their maids Zilpah and Bilhah. He has built considerable wealth through a sort of push and pull agreement with Uncle Laban, in which each of them has tricked the other for wives and for sheep. Yet Jacob always seems to come out on top. He has ambition, and he has God's promise on his side. He's always been able to keep one step ahead of the others, and he's always figured that if he just kept moving fast enough, he could outrun the uncomfortable feelings at the edges of his mind, those feelings that bubble up at 4 a.m., those uncomfortable feelings about his family, about Esau, and about the harms he has done. But now the chickens are coming home to roost. It's time to return home to Canaan, and that means seeing his brother again. Word reaches Jacob that Esau is coming towards him with 400 men. Now, he doesn't know for sure that it's vengeance rather than forgiveness that Esau seeks, but 400 men does not sound good. And so Jacob does what Jacob always does. He makes a plan, and he schemes. He divides his household into camps. He sends extravagant gifts ahead to his brother, trying to win his favor, and he tries desperately to anticipate and manage every possible outcome. He will do anything except face the reality of that which cannot be controlled. He has no idea what his brother is going to do, and he is terrified. Finally, after sending his wives, his children, his servants, and his possessions across the river ahead of him, night falls, and there is nothing more to be done. Jacob is left alone, waiting for morning. Earlier this summer, I found myself lying awake at night as well, this time in a residence room in North York, Ontario, waiting for morning. I am a new student at Tyndale University in their Doctor of Ministry program this summer, and the program is mostly remote, but we have a residency twice a year in which we live, eat, pray, and study together for 2 weeks. This was my home for the next 14 days, and like Jacob, I felt like I was in exile. The room was sparse, just a desk, a dresser, and a narrow twin bed that felt like little more than foam stretched over metal. After several days of sleeping on this bed, my whole body ached, and I was exhausted from not falling asleep until late every night. And I thought, really, that it was the bed's fault. But really, it wasn't the mattress. It was me. I was, the whole time at Tyndale, a ball of nerves, holding myself tightly and defensively all day long. Every lecture, every chapel service, every meal, every casual conversation. I felt like an outsider, and I arrived at Tyndale feeling that way. It's an interdenominational school, but the theology trends conservative. It is not an affirming space at all. Academically, I knew this program was the right fit for me, but I was far less certain about the people. Let's face it, I'm an openly queer, poly United Church minister, about as liberal gets, and here I was in a foreign land. I didn't know their songs, they prayed differently from me, their theology startled me sometimes, and I wasn't sure how much of myself to reveal to them, how much I should protect. I didn't want to make friends with these people, these conservatives, I thought. I was better off on my own, keeping my shields up. And I was gaming for a fight 24 hours a day, just waiting for someone to say something hurtful or homophobic or transphobic. Not because I wanted them to hurt me, but because then it would have been easier to just have my fears confirmed. At least then I could be righteously justified, I thought. Me against them, 400 enemies coming for me, and me all alone at the river. You can probably guess that that's not what actually happened. In actual fact, no one was unkind. Everyone was completely gracious, and I had built up these caricatures of who I thought Tyndale people would be, based entirely on my own stereotypes. Like they would see my rainbow tattoos and my haircut and sound some kind of gay alarm or something. Instead, I found myself unsettled by those friendly conversations that I had across the lunch table. They were just people, after all, and nice ones at that. And still, something felt off. The wrestling inside me continued each and every night. And it took me most of the first week to figure out what it was and why I felt so lonely and out of place. It was in the way that I was acting, in the way that I was introducing myself. Because you see, I have been so accustomed to being open about who I am and being able to tell my whole story without having to edit it. In the circles I usually move in, adding pronouns, mine or she, her, to our name tags is a totally normal thing. Pride flags are everywhere. Referring to my partners, male and female, it's all acceptable. And I don't need to worry if I slip up and somehow mention that I have a trans kid. I can tell my story, and it's not just okay, but it's celebrated. My identity as a queer Christian minister does not need to be at the center of every interaction I make, but I realized how much it was hurting me to keep these parts of myself under wraps. This is who God created me to be, after all, and here I was, hiding it, day in and day out. And as I moved through the campus in my tightly coiled form, it felt as though only part of me was in those classrooms. And so every night, I crawled into bed, aching, and every night I yearned for rest that wouldn't come. Meanwhile, Jacob is still at the river, alone, also gaming for his fight, assuming he knows what Esau has in mind for him, worrying and waiting and awake. And then out of nowhere, someone appears and wrestles with him until daybreak. The story never tells us exactly who this stranger is. Maybe an angel, maybe God. But Jacob himself will later say, I have seen God face to face. Now, who knows what kind of mattress Jacob is sleeping on, but the struggle lasts all night, we are told, and Jacob's body is aching. By daybreak, his hip has been knocked out of joint by his opponent, and he is begging the angel to bless him and let him go. And out of that comes the strangest question of all. What is your name? Now, of course God knows Jacob's name. This isn't a request for basic information. It's an invitation to knowing. Tell me who you are, Jacob, who you really are. Not the polished version or the social media version or the Tyndale friendly version. Not the edited version or the version you've spent your life constructing. Not the you that doesn't have any messy parts. Not the you that's perfect or flawless or never feels ashamed. We all do this. We all tell the parts of our story that feel safe. We all hide the parts of us that ache. We assume we already know how others are going to receive us, and so we brace ourselves. And we stay up at night, rehearsing the fight before it even starts. How will Jacob answer? How would I? How would you? What do you omit from your story on a daily basis? And what are you keeping hidden from the world? There is this beautiful practice in many Indigenous communities where introductions, when they are given, are never just names. People tell you where they come from, who their parents are, who their people are. They introduce themselves by telling their story. What does that sound like for you? I'm Allison. My pronouns are she, her. I was born in Albany, New York, and my parents are John Hurst of Toronto and Marilyn Brown of Orangeville. I grew up in Mississauga. I live in Yellowknife. I have 2 sons, 2 partners, 2 jobs, and 2 tortoiseshell cats. I love to read. I hate cooking dinner. I wish my sister and I were closer. I'm pretty sure I have ADHD. I've struggled a lot with my mental health in my life. And when I was 37, my heart tried to kill me, and it changed my life. I fly a lot, but landings still scare me. Tell me who you are, who you really are, begs the angel. And Jacob answers, My name is Jacob. And there's a beat of silence. What else could he say? I'm the trickster, the heel grabber, the younger brother who tried to take his older brother's place, my mother's favorite, the one who ran away. My uncle tricked me into my first marriage and then tried to trick me out of my sheep. I tricked him back and stole his wealth. I love one of my wives more than the other. I worry a lot about my children. I play favorites. I feel guilty every night for the things I have done. And I carry God's promise, but I'm not sure why. And into this loaded silence, this honest, unspoken, unwritten confession, God speaks. You are now called Israel, because you have striven with humans and wrestled with God, and you have prevailed, and you are blessed. In our story, we leave Jacob in the morning at the sunrise, limping across the river with his sore hip. In chapter 33, we will learn that Jacob and Esau do reconcile, but the happy ending isn't actually the point of this story, or at least the happy ending wouldn't be possible without the wrestling match that precedes it. When Jacob wakes from his sleepless night, his life is still very much as before, as complicated as ever. What has changed in the night is that Jacob stops running and meets God. That night, he stops chasing a different identity, and he stops hiding, and he stops trying to outrun the things he's done, and he stops trying to outsmart everybody. Sin has scattered his life into pieces, and that night at Peniel, God looks Jacob in the eye, and he begins knitting him back together. Jacob's failures belong, his calling belongs, his grief belongs, his courage belongs. And then, only then, after Jacob has wrestled with God as his whole self, only then is he ready to cross the river. He still has no idea what Esau will do. He can't control that, actually. He never could. He spent a lifetime trying to manipulate others to his advantage. But this morning, in the light of day, he is done with tricks. All that remains is who he will be, aches and pains and dislocated hip and all, who he will be when he meets his brother on the road. Towards the end of my 2 weeks at Tyndale, I realized I wasn't fooling anybody. My classmates already knew I was queer. And when I took the plunge and finally spoke it out loud, I wasn't revealing a secret. I was just finishing my introduction properly. I decided that, for better or for worse, I didn't want to spend the next 3 years building relationships with people who would only know part of me. And so I confessed, not to being queer, that's not a sin, but to something else. Just as Jacob thinks he knows what Esau will do to him, I had already decided how the story was going to end. I had assumed I knew how these people would respond to me if they met the real me. I had let the fear write the ending of the story before we'd even begun to know each other, and that was wrong. Because God surprised me again, because that's what God does. My classmates responded to me with grace and with honesty of their own. Another classmate shared her story, and then another, and then another. And that afternoon, the walls that each of us had built up began to come down, finally, and we began to know each other just a little bit, for real. It's not that we don't have disagreements and differences. We do. We will for the next 3 years, pretty big ones. But that night in the chapel, we sang together, "I am a child of God." And I felt those words in a way that I haven't in years. I finally slept that night. Morning came, as it does for Jacob, as it always does for all of us. And I still don't know what waits for me on the other side of the river. There will be disagreements. There will be hard conversations. There will be things that I cannot control. But I no longer have to cross the river pretending to be someone I'm not. Friends, every one of us, every one of you has a river to cross. And when you come to yours, perhaps God will ask the same question that God asked Jacob. What is your name? Not because God doesn't know, but because they are inviting you to bring your whole story to the picture. The joyful parts and the grieving parts and the guilty parts and the hopeful parts and the frightened parts. All of the messy bits. Because, friends, you are God's beloved and your whole self belongs. Amen.